And after all, the flood came. No one hadn't believed any more in it. The flood was enormous. It was immense. It was more giant than the Queen Mother ever dreamt it. The waters were drowning the land. Everything was lost, up to the highest mountains. 4 weeks long, a storm was slashing the meadows, destroyed settlements, and carried away the entire vegetation. Cadavers of drowned animals drifted to the sea. It was raining endlessly. The 28th day, the rain faded away a bit. The people relaxed. They thought they could leave the islands within the next weeks, to go back to their land, to rebuild their settlements. The Queen gave order to stay at the islands, because the Queen Mother had seen in a dream that the disaster was going on. The people became impatient by waiting. Some guys absconded. Secretly they rode to the mainland to investigate how big the damage was. 2 weeks later the rain almost set out, and the people became as impatient as never before. There were people who tried to get special permissions to leave the islands. The Queen refused. She gave order to bring back the runaways from the mainland to the islands. The people were waiting. The summer came. A suffocating heat was laying over all 4 islands, bobbing up and down the thick water. The sea was slick. Not even one gentle breeze was taking away the muggy heat. Every eye was catching the mainland longingly. The Queen gave order to stay. The people were waiting and sweating. During the hottest days of midsummer, animals were dying as quick as mayflies, and a lot of elderly people also risked to fade away. Suddenly there was much to do to take care for life, health and security of the people and the animals. No one looked any more to the mainland. It took just 4 days for large parts of the glaciers in the mountains to break away and to slip down the valleys. Masses of water that had been backed up in the glacial mills were shooting down the mountains, burying everything on their way. When the water reached the meadows another 4 days later, the islands started swaying slightly. The people were again watching to the mainland. Helplessly, they were looking at the giant wave flooding the forests and the hills, drowning animals and plants, rolling towards the meadows and the seaside. Even seen from a distance, the destructions were so enormous that tears were running down the people's cheeks. It was time of grief. Helplessly, like encaged animals, they were running up and down the island's beaches. They wanted to act, but the Queen forbid it. The following days, the swaying of the islands increased. 4 days later, the people mentioned that not at all the giant flood at the mainland was the reason for it, but a tremble that was coming up slowly from the deepest depths of the ocean, getting quickly heavier and heavier. From the giant unknown blue was coming up a frightful energy, blowing up the waters. The people were freezing for fear when they understood what they had to expect. There were people getting cramps by waiting. The islands were swaying. The people were waiting. The islands increased their swaying. The people were watching how the flood was driving dead animals, plants, and entire houses from the mainland to the ocean. The people were realizing that the swaying of the islands were increasing. They hoped they were wrong in feeling so. They were waiting. They were realizing that the brooks in the mountains were running dry, and they were hoping that this would be the end. It was raining stronger. Wind was slashing over the water. And suddenly, with an enormous jolt, the ocean was rearing. The islands were riding on a giant wave directly to the seasides of the mainland. The Queen knew that there would not be a chance to be rescued if the islands would strand or bump into each other. And she knew perfectly well that there was nothing to do to control over this situation. The islands were no ships that could be navigated. She tried to take care for her people by giving order to stay inside of the houses. Houses at the seaside were evacuated. No one should go overboard. There was no way to rescue him or her. The people were panicking when the islands were taken away by the flood wave that came from the ocean, colliding with a flood wave that came from the mainland. The islands were swirling through the booming froth like little paper boats. They were taken up to the highest crests, falling down again endlessly to the deepest troughs of the sea. The people thought they had to die. They were cramping at each other fearfully. Children were screaming, mothers and fathers were crying. 40 long hours of agony, they were cramping at their lives. And in the very last hour, when a lot of people thought their death was near, their life in paradise was coming up in an inner review, a life that should be over forever. Then the sea was calming down.